I'm very excited to introduce you to Ben Robbins, who's the psychologist with the Essendon Football Club and also a high-performance psychologist. It's great to have you on the show, Ben.
Good on you, Kate. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to our chat.
I am very much looking forward to this chat. You work in the football world. How do you become the psychologist for the Essendon Football Club?
Well, I had a playing career, so it was about 10 years as an AFL player with Brisbane Lions in North Melbourne. And during that time, I had about 0 conversations with a psychologist in 10 years, right? So it just wasn't something that we did. It wasn't something that was acceptable. We didn't talk about mental health. We didn't really talk about psychological performance. I get to the end of my career, it's like, I don't know. I think I could have really benefited from actually doing some work in this space. And I was working at Toll Logistics in a sort of administrative role in human resources. And I was working with 2 psychologists, both organisational psychologists, and the work they was doing was really interesting to me. And so I thought, I'll just have a go at this. I'll go to uni. I'll just go for a year or a semester and just see how I go. Anyway, 10 years later, finished my uni with a PhD, and obviously a lot of research involved, and I just loved it. It was really interesting. I was just like, there's so many applications here to psychology in professional sport that I just don't think. Well, certainly I never experienced, and I think the vast majority of my teammates did either. And yeah, we talk about it all the time now with the coaches at Essendon who are all ex-players. Would have loved to have done more of this as a player ourselves. After I finished my study, I went to St Kilda. I had 4 years there, and then I started at Essendon at the start of 2024. So I'm into my 2nd season there now.
Wow. And what does it entail? What does a day in the life of a psychologist within a football club look like?
It can vary. Primarily, I'm there for the players' mental health. So it will involve, we do regular sort of assessments of the players, self-assessments, and then I'll check in with different guys depending on how those self-assessments come back. I'll work with our coaches on, game review, on performance concepts, and then I'll work with the playing group both at a group level. So we might have workshops, particularly in the pre-season, we do a lot of those, and then at an individual level too. And that individual stuff's probably where the majority of my work is done. And that can range from, stuff they're dealing with at a personal level through to, clearly their footy performance and things that are happening for them out on the ground. So it can be pretty varied. I do a bit of work in the leadership space too with our leadership group. So it's a really broad role, and one that's I'm really lucky to be in, and I really enjoy it.
Are you involved on game day? Is that a significant part of what you do?
Yeah, it is, and yes, I am. So I travel with the team. My role game day, we do a little bit of work with some of the players pre-game. Those that want to. Some guys, we let the players prepare as they want to prepare to a certain degree. But there's a group of players that want to do some mental preparation work before the game, and then during the game, I'll sit on the bench and I've got a headset where I'm speaking to the coach, passing on messages, talking to players about different concepts. Just helping them manage the stresses and ups and downs of a game of AFL footy, of which there are a lot. So so it's a great role. But we travel with the team.
No, that's fantastic. It would be extraordinary, and I imagine the stresses are just so huge because it's elite, and because it's the crowd, it's the supporters, it's the sponsors. There's all of these things. And of course, every team has as its, vision that they exist to win grand finals. There's the pressure of trying to win something which is almost impossible to win. So how do people stay grounded in that space? What is the secret sauce here?
Well, there's no secret. It's a lot of hard work. We really do frame it as you go into the gym, you lift weights, you get stronger, you go out to the oval and you practice your skills, you're kicking your handball to get better. if we want to improve our ability to manage pressure, the inevitable pressure, manage adversity, hundreds of mistakes in a game of AFL footy, you cannot get bogged down in a mistake because it takes you away from what has to happen next. And they are making 1,000 decisions in a game: where to run, when to run, what to do, most of the time without the ball. And then so it's really complex cognitively. But then when you pile on top of that all those factors you just mentioned, the crowd, which is a big one, particularly at Essendon, it's a big club and they play in big games. Anzac Day, Dreamtime, we just played in that last week where there's 90,000 in the MCG. And we would like to play in some finals. We're working towards it. Yeah. Any Essendon supporters that are listening, we're doing our best at the moment, and we've got a really promising group at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's the external, what we would call distractions, and then there's the internal distractions, which is the inner voice telling you you're not good enough, and what about that kick you just messed up, and am I going to get a game next week, and all the stuff that pops up for them. So they train for it, we prepare them for it, and we use each game as practice. Like, you're just practicing to be in the moment more than anything. That's what we're trying to do, is to help them stay present and focus on what's in front of them, not what's to come or what's been. Easier said than done.
I can imagine, and you see it. I mean, it's emotional regulation seems to be one of the most important elements of successful anything, like high performance leaders, whether it's sport or somewhere else. Emotional regulation is key. I want to ask a question though about the umpires.
Oh, I was just thinking about umpires when you said emotional regulation. Yes, go ahead.
Well, there must be moments in a game where it feels incredibly unfair. You know, when a free's not given that everybody else sees, or, you know, a free against you and you're thinking that didn't exist. And we all see the replay on the screen and it's all like, how do they cope with that?
Well, again, consistent theme here, Kate, practice. We talk about it a lot, not just umpiring, but umpiring. You cannot stay stuck in it because,
no. And
I was terrible at this as a player, and it was really poor when I reflect back on it. I used to argue with umpires all the time, and it was just so unhelpful. But it was never something I tried to change. No one ever sort of raised it with me. I knew I was terrible at it, but it was just like, oh, well, what can you do about it? Well, you can do something about it, and you sort of have to, because in the modern game, it moves so quickly that if you are arguing with the umpire about a free kick, you are letting your team down, essentially, because the play's moved on. And you need to be engaged in that next piece of play because you have a job. And so we've worked really hard with our team on staying level. Your initial response, you've got emotion, you're passionate about the game. And when there's an injustice or a perceived injustice, yes, you want to argue, but we've got to move on. And so we train it, we talk about it, we practice it. That's all you can really do. But it does not mean it is still very frustrating at times.
No. So when you were thinking about umpiring, was it the same issue or was it something else?
When I was arguing with the umpire?
No. When you were saying before, you were thinking when emotional regulation and umpiring came into mind. Is that the same concept?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because it's emotion. You're discharging your emotion. You're frustrated. You want someone to blame.
Yeah.
You know, which is a really normal human response. When something goes wrong, who's to blame? We automatically go there. But it's so unhelpful to our performance. You mentioned earlier, so unhelpful to any aspect of performance, leadership, whatever it is. Who's to blame? He's not going to help you. It's okay. What do we need to do to work through this situation, and how can we get back on task as quickly as possible? Which, while we're sitting here in the, having a nice, easy chat, and it's easy to talk about. It is much more difficult when it's, games on the line, and there's 60,000 people at the ground, and it's much harder.
It would be huge. I often think of sort of those high emotion moments. I try and sort of think, if you were going into emergency and somebody's bleeding and the doctor sort of had an emotional reaction to lots of blood and all the things, we'd be in trouble. And being able, not that I want to be a doctor, but I just always think about that. I'm grateful for their capacity to just stay focused on the facts. Like, it's just an intellectual moment. It's not an emotional moment. And I work in conflict. And so there's often lots of emotion around conflict. But really, if you can regulate the emotions and then look at the information and stay out of the emotion, it's a much easier place to be. So then I'm always in this world of curiosity. I wonder why that happened rather than, who's to blame, because who's to blame leads to a blame culture, which is it's a lose-lose outcome.
Yeah, it's really interesting to say that. So umpires are a big distraction, but so is personal performance and mistakes for the players as the game's in progress. And so one of the things we do talk about with them is, you mentioned curiosity.
Mm.
If you lose a contest, say your opponent takes a mark on you, kicks a goal.
Mm.
Again, your normal human response is, for your inner critic to get quite loud and tell you you're doing a terrible job and you don't belong, and that sort of inner dialogue. We want to train our players in, rather than going there immediately, go to what happened as objectively as possible. Why did I lose that contest? My opponent just took a better position. I'm going to adjust my positioning next time. I'm going to try and get in front and playing from. So you're working through the problem there rather than just piling on yourself, which keeps you stuck, takes you out of the moment. So another one of our key skills is just how you talk to yourself and how you coach yourself through those tough moments, and curiosity is a big part of it.
Yeah. How do you support players who then do get dropped? Because that must be pretty tough, and particularly those exit, interviews at the end of the year. Yeah,
it's the hardest thing in footy. Getting drops difficult, but there's always a game to play in the reserves competition, or another game next week. So there's always opportunity. So it is hard, but the real hard one is the end of the year when players get delisted. They lose their jobs.
Yeah.
And that happens to between 8 and 10 players every year. It is a really cutthroat business. Every kid that wants to play footy, they grow up and they get their opportunity in the AFL, and then it's taken away, sometimes prematurely, and that's a really difficult one. So it's a lot about empathy, clearly helping them see a way forward, understanding that the journey at this club is over, but that doesn't mean their career's over, because we see all the time people miss drafts or they get delisted and they go to another club and they can really turn things around. So it's the end of one journey at a club, but it doesn't mean it's the end completely. And so, but it's a really tough industry. But we talk about again, it's an abnormal environment, but that's what it is. So we've got to work with that. It's not a normal job.
No, it's not a normal job. And I suppose the other element of all of this, and which makes AFL, but I think all leadership, is that, clearly there's a lot of eyes on them all the time, and a lot of commentary on social media that they have no capacity to fight back. I can't even imagine. But there's a lot of eyes. When you're in corporate leadership, there's a lot of eyes. There's eyes on people who are successful. How do you help them manage their mental health away from the club?
Yeah, so it's a big focus. Because for those points, again, an abnormal environment, right, where you do your job, you go along and do your job, and maybe you don't do a great job, so you don't have a great game, and then, which is, okay, you got to deal with that. But then it's the secondary commentary on social media or traditional media, either way, but particularly social media, because it's much less regulated, where you can sort of, the real nasty, horrible stuff really can get said. We talk about it all the time, and it's not a case of, just stay off social media, because this is not the world that our players inhabit. That's the reality. They spend a lot of time on social media. That's the reality of the world. It's who you listen to. That's probably the main thing we talk to them about, is just be wary of who you're giving your attention to, who are you listening to, whose opinions matter. Because when you really think about it, for most of our players, it's a really small group of people whose opinions really matter about their footy. The coaches is probably the largest group, and they care about what their parents think or their partner. But at the end of the day, what are your coaches telling you? Let's stay focused there. It's a really supportive environment. There's enough critics out in the world. We're not critics. We're coaches. We're there to coach them, not criticize them. We talk about that all the time. And so just try to support them as best we can.
Oh, and also a lot of them are very young,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 18 when they come.
18, they're babies.
Some of them are still at school.
Yeah.
So it's
So young.
you have to grow up quickly, and you make mistakes and they, missteps. I mean, they're really good these days, though. Which is this I don't know. Kids today seem so mature to me, way more mature than what I was when they were their age.
I know, it's fantastic. So one of the joys of watching good football is when there is this extraordinary, there's alignment, there's this, they just sort of know where the next person's going to be and the ball moves really quickly and there's just, you just go, it's like art. It is so
Yeah.
precise and they're just there and there's bang, bang, bang and they know where they are. They know where the next person's going to be. How do they achieve that? I know they train for it, but how do they build the trust to know that they'll be there?
I wish I had a really sort of simple answer for you, but I don't know that there is. Like every team's searching for that. All right. So this idea of connection and team dynamics, and because it's the game now, very different to when I played. It was much more about you and your opponent, and you just ran around together all day. Now there's 18, and you're all connected. You all move together. If we react to each other. And so to your point, it's sort of, you're in concert or you're trying to be. And if one player isn't in concert, the opposition will just get through us and they'll have they'll have a shot at goal. So you really do need to be so connected to the guy next to you. How do you get it? Well, you try and highlight where we do it well. You really reinforce the primacy of team over individual. But you think about what I was talking about earlier, when everyone's fighting for contracts and spots in the team, and it's so difficult because we want the team is more important than the individual, but I've got to play good, otherwise I'm going to get dropped. I'm not going to get a contract. And so we're constantly wrestling with how do we help the players see that their success related to obviously the team success, and the team success will provide them with opportunity. But it is really difficult, particularly when you've got a young team. So you need that's why experience matters, because I know in this situation we're facing, I know what you're going to do because we've played together a lot. We're really familiar with each other. When you've got a young team, that's probably the biggest challenge is lack of exposure to each other.
Yeah.
Which Essendon, that's a spot we're in at the minute, but it also presents a lot of opportunity to help shape them and build them.
Yeah. So in corporate workplaces, they sort of are trying to address that through team building exercises and, various things. And I'm a huge fan of building relationships so that we can have conversations. And so you can't just talk about work. Like if we only ever talk about work, if the work is the only thing that's important, then we've lost sight of humanness and our need for connection. How do you do it in a football club? Because it's footy. And you see people go, they go out for dinner and they do bits and pieces. But how do you build that connection? How do you build that it's not work all the time so competitive?
Yeah, I think the environment of a footy club does lend itself to it pretty well. There's a lot of humour.
Yeah,
like you sort of they're like in the men's program. They're like brothers, really. But with brothers, sometimes you argue, and you don't always see eye to eye. But there's a sense of care and belonging.
Yeah,
part of it. Your family, really. Like, they spend so much time together, traveling together, training together, in the locker room, in the weights room. So you really do become like a family, and they spend a lot of time just talking about non-footy stuff, because for most of them, they talk about footy. That's what everybody wants to talk to them about. Their families, their friends, what's happening with your footy. I think there's actually a bit of a release for them with their teammates, because they're all in the same boat and like, let's talk about something different.
Yeah.
So, and in terms of the team dynamic, so we spend a lot of time on that connection on field and what that looks like, and how do we build that, and those guys out there talking about it, how it felt out there, things they noticed in each other, the behavior that they liked or didn't like, so it's such a, you mentioned the corporate world, like the footballers come out of a career so well prepared for feedback more than anything, because you get it all day, every day. And then every week you get a performance review when you go out and play. And then we review it and we go on and everyone tries to improve and you just constantly, so you get so good at giving feedback, receiving feedback, taking on board, trying to get better because that's what the environment is. And so these guys are really, really good at that. I can't think of another sort of industry where it happens like that.
I know, and I agree. I think sport is a really powerful place of feedback because there is a camera, particularly when you're in elite sport. There's a camera generally on you. You're getting a replay back straight away. There's going to be those reviews, and a colleague of mine is a high performance coach, and I've seen him at a netball game watching the coach. That he just watches the coach. He's not watching anything else. He's just watching the coach. See her response to the game. And I have asked if he could wear a GoPro so I could live vicariously through his experiences because I just think it's so fascinating.
Yeah.
But I think that's so true because in the corporate space, we're terrible at feedback. I mean, we're terrified of feedback. And that then enhances the blame game because we do it so badly. And then it's sort of like, well, here's my feedback. You stuffed up. And I think my hat is off to people who are in that elite space. And I think the arts is very similar because they get notes. So they're constantly getting notes and their performance and they get filmed. So in the arts and in sport, you've regularly got feedback. But in the corporate space, it's sort of like, that hurt, you know. And I get people ringing me, asking me, how do I speak? I'm a CEO. How do I give feedback to my executive, whatever? And it's like, give it because you need to give it. That's your job. You need to give feedback.
Yeah, well, I mean, the team lives and dies by it, really.
Yeah.
On field, off field. That's how we talk about connection earlier. That's how we become more connected by communicating with each other, understanding that stuff goes wrong.
Yeah.
Like it's an oval ball. Mistakes are made. We're just trying to be the best team we can. So all the feedback's given in service of that.
So it sounds like it's a lot more authentic. Like there's a lot more genuine conversation happening probably in between footballers now than possibly happened when you were playing.
Definitely. I don't, I was part of the Brisbane Lions, really successful team for at least part of that. And I didn't really remember sort of us being great at feedback. It doesn't stand out to me. Whereas I think now, the guys are. While we would all say, we've got to get better at doing it. I think we're actually, given the ages of the people involved, often 18, 19-year-olds doing this. When, like you said earlier, it's hard for a 50-year-old CEO to be able to do this. They're hard skills, and they've been, they've obviously got a whole heap of life experience, where our guys don't. But you just get trained in it. And okay, we're far from perfect, but what we do is we spend a lot of time on it because it's so crucial to team performance.
That's fantastic. So you also do some work in the not the corporate but the corporate world. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's transferring or using the knowledge of performance concepts from professional sport and applying them in not exclusively blue collar, but mainly blue collar workforces, particularly where safety and or high risk industry that require a lot of focus and concentration and emotion regulation, all of the same skills that professional athletes are trying to train and improve in. And so, I work with a number of organizations about helping their employees, their people, be able to focus and concentrate when they're doing their performance, whether that's as you're a driver, you're operating a forklift or some sort of heavy machinery where if you aren't focused, if you aren't concentrating and you make a mistake, like things can go really, really badly wrong. And usually with these sort of roles, the people in them are trained so well technically, like they know their stuff. They're really well skilled and they've done it often for many years. So they know what they're doing. When things go wrong, it's typically not a lack of knowledge or technical expertise. It's that it's a human factor. They've lost focus, they've lost concentration, they've allowed emotion to hijack their attention. So it's working in that space, which is really interesting. And we've got some really interesting work that we're doing at the moment in that space with some big organizations. Yeah.
So, so how do you help them focus? What is what do you do to help them focus?
Yeah, well, you train it. You try, like, I think back to my school teacher and, Ben, pay attention. It's like, okay, like, how?
Yeah.
It's sort of like we're expected to know these
Yeah.
skills, but it's like, Ben, play the guitar. It's no different, because it's a skill to focus and pay attention. So it's got to be trained. How do you train it? Well, we call it attention control. Like, you might call it mindfulness or
Yeah.
meditation, or that, there's a whole range of terms for this, but we refer to it as attention control, shifting your attention from wherever it is to where you want it to be. I use the story. So this is just an example of how you can do it, right? My son, he's a little bit older now, but when he was at primary school, he'd come home from school and I'd ask him about his day. How's school today, mate? As I'm sure many parents do. And then he would, he'd start telling me, but he'd tell me in, excruciating detail, literally every single thing that he's done throughout the whole day. And, like, you're trying to listen, you're trying to pay attention, but so many things are vying for it. You've got the email to answer, you've got the player to call back, you've got dinner to cook, and you've got your phone, and you get a text, and Charlie's he's talking to me and he's telling me about his day, and then he's like, "Hey, Dad, are you listening?" And it's like, "Oh, mate, no, sorry, I missed that last bit. Can you just tell me that again?" And if we have enough of those, like, he's going to stop telling me about his day, because he knows I'm not listening. Like, we've got all these opportunities to train our attention. Like, it's like, he's my son. I love him. I want to have a great relationship with him. Clearly, my inability to pay attention to what he's saying hurts our relationship. And so it's just a conscious awareness of, what are you doing with this thing? This spotlight of attention, where is it? And when Charlie walks in the door, I want it to be with him. For 5 minutes, he's got everything I've got to give. Then I can worry about all that other stuff. Then I'll focus on that stuff. But that's a skill to do that, because that's something that most of us we don't think about or try to.
And it's harder in our world of phones and social media, and
I think so. Well, I think so. I think it is, because this thing here, my phone's sitting off to the side here, and I'm sure yours won't be far away either. It's sort of always there. It's dinging. It's wanting your attention. Someone wants your attention. Everyone's vying. That's the currency of sort of the modern world, is attention. And so, where's yours going? Who's getting it? Do you want that thing to get it? These are sort of the questions that we ask ourselves. And when we're doing this training work, it's often just helping people understand, where's their attention going? Is it helping? Would you like it to be somewhere else? Okay, how can we make that happen? And there's a whole range of sort of exercises and training you can actually do to help with that.
And does that help with emotional regulation?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's as much as, what are you doing with your attention? Because you can focus your attention on what's happening for you internally and become a bit of an expert in that, rather than being thrown around by emotion, rather than being dictated to. I'm angry, so I do this. I'm sad, so I do this. It's like noticing your anger, noticing your sadness or loneliness, whatever the emotion is, and going, okay, I see it's there, but I'm just going to accept it. And here's the thing I'm going to do, because that's, what the situation demands, or what's in line with my values, or however you want to make your decisions, rather than from emotion.
Yeah.
But you're going to experience emotion. You're going to get angry. You're going to get sad. You're going to get lonely. So it's just working with that a bit more effectively. Another skill.
Fantastic. That is fantastic. I think that's something that sort of we apply a bit in working with people in conflict, is acknowledging, noticing the emotion, but it's an emotion. It's not a fact. So just sit with it. Let it pass. It'll pass.
It will pass.
But you can't think clearly while that's all happening. So
that's your fight and flight response. That's your prefrontal cortex not operating as well as it can. There's a whole range of really good evolutionary reasons why that happens. But
but we need to sort of manage it. No.
Yeah.
I think I could talk to you all day, Ben.
All right. Okay. Great.
I love psychology. Everybody knows that I wanted to be a psychologist, but I couldn't do maths, so that was the end of that.
Yeah, statistics is a big part of the training. I don't know. Still don't fully understand why, but anyway.
Well,
is.
that was the end of me. So here I am doing mediation and conflict management work.
But
But
I
I
mean,
love
you're a psychologist in that
I
space. It's like I say to our coaches all the time. I mean, our physios, they're the psychologists. Honestly, the players when they're on the, they've got an injury or they're getting a rub or whatever it is, they're talking, and the physiotherapists and the coaches, they're the real psychologists.
Oh, that'd be huge. They'd hear a story or two. They would.
Absolutely.
It's like hairdressers.
Yes. That's exactly the same, actually.
Yeah.
It all comes out, right?
It all comes out. Here we are in a safe space. Let me tell you about myself. Ben, thank you so much for this. This has been fantastic. I love that we have psychologists in elite football clubs, in elite sport. I think it is so important because I think the eyes of the world and the pressure, the stress that people are under, and whether or not that's corporate or not, but in corporate, I think this is why people need coaches or they need psychologists or they need somebody, because you need somebody to talk to unpack this stuff, because it's a big, hard old world out there. And when you are either, when you're high performance anything, there's a lot of pressure and it's a bit lonely, It
is. It's more than a bit lonely at times.
Yeah.
No, it's very lonely, and you're spot on. Sometimes you just need somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
Who's not going to judge you.
So,
That's
really
honestly a very big part of my role. So.
Yeah, that is beautiful. Well, it's been a pleasure. So thank you very much.
Good on you, Kate. Thanks very much for having me. Thanks. Great to chat.
Cheers.